Hi, everyone. My name is Simona Milanovic. I work as an Android developer relations engineer working at Google. I work on Jetpack Compose and Android Studio UI tools.
Hi everyone, I'm Jose Alferrica, also an Android developer relations engineer working on developer productivity.
Thanks for coming to our talk today, where we'll share with you many new and improved AI features for the Android Studio agent. We'll show how these features can assist you in your daily workflows and how best to use them to get the most out of them. Now, our goal is pretty straightforward. We want Android Studio to have the most knowledgeable and truly helpful AI agent for Android development. That's why we're focusing on creating features that you can actually trust enough to delegate those more repetitive tasks to, so you can focus on the more exciting bits of Android development. We're going to be showing a lot of live demos today that depend on AI models and use experimental features. So AI models, experimental features, live demos, anything can happen. So we might need to improvise here and there and help it out a bit, but we'll appreciate your understanding and patience if we have to do something like that. Before we dive into the demos, though, we need to go over a few main concepts, things like tools, MCPs, contexts, so that we can then dive into the coding with a bit more understanding. Where do you?
All right, let's get started and move to the laptop, please. Thank you. All right, so I have here a version of Android Studio. This is a Canary version. It has some things that are not available yet. We'll tell you which ones those are. We're going to be focusing on Android Studio's agent, and this is the main UI, this window pane here that you can open and close with this icon. All right, so the agent is not just a chatbot, it can also perform tasks, complex and simple. So let's start with a simple one. What's today's? This is not my laptop, as you can see. Agenda. All right, so in order to work with the agent, you need to connect it to a large language model, which you can select here if you have an API key. If not, you can use the default model at no cost. All right, so in order to understand agents, we need to talk a little bit about the basics, like Simona said. We're going to be talking a lot about tools, a little bit of context, and then we'll move on to some demos, which is what you're here for. So something we are going to be mentioning all the time in this talk are tools. Tools are what make agents different and what make Android Studio's agent special. So I'm going to run this command /tools, and this is the list of tools available in the agent. One of the first things that the agent does when you start a new task is send this list of tools to the model, or a version of this list of tools. It's basically saying, hey, if you need anything from here, just let me know. I will run it for you. But it's important to note that it's the model who decides which tools to use and what parameters to use with those tools. Then once the agent has run a tool, it sends the response back to the model, and then the model decides what to do next. So I'm going to start with a simple example, like where's the theme defined in this project? It's very important to note that your code base is not sent to the model. That would be incredibly wasteful. It would make things a lot slower and the accuracy would go down. Instead, what's going on here is the model has a problem to solve, which is this prompt, and it has some resources, some tools, which is the list of tools that we just saw. So I decided in this case to use the find files tool with the theme.kt as a parameter. This is actually very smart because it knows that most Android apps define their theme in a file that ends in theme.kt. That's the power of using a large language model, right? And it got a response, and that's correct. If the results were empty, then it would try something else, maybe the grep tool or something like that. Let me go back to the list of tools, and now that we know how they work, maybe we can look at the list and understand better what's available. So we have things like write file, version lookup, read file, which is probably the most important one, Gradle sync, and others. Okay, so what we did was pretty simple. Find files is a tool that every agent has, but we can also ask something like, what's the latest version of Lottie? So what's going on now, this is a lot more interesting because it's combining the power of the language model with the power of Android Studio. Android Studio has a tool to do version lookups. So we are exposing this tool through the agent to the model. Now the model has the power to use that functionality from Android Studio. But also the model knows that when I say Lottie, I actually am referring to this particular artifact, com Airbnb Android Lottie. So combining the two gets us the right answer. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more advanced. So let's say that you are in the middle of a task, or rather the agent is in the middle of a task, and you want to run tests because you're done with this repository here, or the agent is done with the repository. So the question is, how do I run the tests for this class? So what Gradle task do I have to run to execute the tests that cover this class? Maybe you can be a little bit less verbose with that, but just to make sure. Again, it's not reading any files. It's just using the tools that are available. So in this case, it used something called get Gradle artifact from file, then get unit test for artifact, and then get test task for artifact. And it ended up finding the actual Gradle task that we need to run the tests. This is great. It just took a couple of seconds. Doing this by just reading files would be a lot more complex, slow, and probably less accurate. All these tools are consider them internal, so you don't have to worry about them, but it's really interesting to know what's available. And one of the tools that you would benefit from knowing that is available is the tools related to the knowledge base. So we all expect the agent in Android Studio to be really knowledgeable about Android. The problem is that models are trained at some point with existing data, right? So everything that is released after this training is not known in principle by the model. So and also the models are large language models, not encyclopedias. So turns out that if you complement the models with some knowledge, or at least a way to find that knowledge, their accuracy improves a lot. So in order to improve the performance of the agent, we created something that we call the Android Knowledge Base, which is a collection of documentation from Android Docs, Firebase, Kotlin Lang, and Google developers. And it's exposed as a tool. So if we go back to the list of tools, it's actually here, search Android Docs. There's another tool to fetch the tool, the docs. So I can ask something like, tell me about Navigation 3. Navigation 3 is a fairly new API. So we know that the model doesn't know about it. But interestingly, it knows that it doesn't know about it. So the first thing that the model decides to do here is to search documentation. So it looked for Navigation 3, and it got a bunch of results. The results actually include a short description, and that's enough for the model to do this summary of Navigation 3. So, saying that it's experimental, it's for compose, etc., etc. So this is great. This has really big implications because now with the agent, you can use APIs like Android XR, the new Gemini APIs, etc. A tip that I want to share with you is that if you think that the agent is going to benefit from this tool, feel free to add something to the prompt along the lines of check the docs, or make sure to check the documentation before creating tasks, etc. That actually helps a lot in triggering the tool. All right, so far we've talked about the integrated tools. but you can actually add more to your agent. You've probably heard of MCP or MCP servers. That's how you add them. For example, GitHub has an MCP server that lets you manage your repositories, issues, pull requests. So from the agent window, you can say something like, fetch my issues and fix them, or whatever you want. But today I want to demo another MCP server, the Figma MCP server, which is really interesting. So I have here the Figma desktop app for Mac. And this one actually runs the MCP itself, the MCP server. So if I go to settings and enable MCP servers, you can see here that I have Figma configured, and it's pointing to a local URL. That's the server that is running in the app. And this is actually a very common pattern for MCP servers to be local. Oftentimes they are run in a Docker container or in a binary, but you can also configure it remotely. I didn't use the remote one because I didn't want to leak all my API keys to you. So, okay, so now that it's enabled, I can run tools again, and you can see that there's a new section for Figma. It has tools like get design context, get screenshot, get the metadata, etc. So I'm going to open my screen here, which is really boring. It's just a list. Oh, what? 1 second. Well, in any case, I have a list of items here, and you can add new items to it. And I have here the design in Figma that I want to bring to create with the agent. So now that I have the MCP server configured, I can say something like, take a screenshot of what I have selected on Figma and convert the current screen to look like it. Again, you probably can be a lot less verbose. I'm not going to show the full demo because this would take like 3 or 5 times because it needs to build and sync multiple times. And I don't have anything selected here on Figma. Oh, okay. Sorry, I have to select something otherwise. The point of this is to show you that we added the MCP server, and now we have new Figma tools here that bring directly the design to the agent. And just with this, the agent is capable, and with the model, is capable of creating a whole design and adapt the screen that I have open. In this case, it took the screenshot here, and you can see how it brought it from Figma. So I'm going to stop this. Simona is going to show a lot more UI AI demos, so you'll have to wait for that. All right, so another important concept we need to talk about is context. Whenever you start a task, we've already established that the list of tools is sent to the model, but there's also other things that are sent, and we call this the context. But because we are inside of Android Studio, the agent has access to a lot more interesting information compared to a generic agent. Every time you open a project, there's a lot of information being generated. There's a lot of analysis being made. Whenever you sync or whenever you build, information is generated. So it's good that it's exposed to the agent. So the simplest example to show this is something like, what's the name of this project? And as you can see, the model didn't need to call any tools. It didn't read any files. And this is because the name of the project is part of the context. So speaking of context, you have here, you can choose what context to add to every task. So normally you are always sending the contents of the current file that you have open. You can also add the recent files. And then these two items here, agents, empty, and rules, let you customize that content. Lets you add whatever you want in natural language to it. So let's start with rules. I'll open the settings here. And you can scope rules to the IDE or the project, whatever you want. And in here, you can write whatever. In this case, I added the agenda. That's how I did it in the beginning. It wasn't anything sophisticated. I didn't create MCP servers or anything like that. It's just in the rules that are scoped to the ID. This would be a good place to add things about yourself. Like my GitHub username is whatever. If you're using the MCP, the MCP server from GitHub, or if you feel adventurous, you can say something like "talk like a pirate," whatever you want. This is great for yourself, but if you want to share this information with your team, you can use a new standard called agents.md. So I'm just going to show the example that I created here. Let's do world wrap or not. Okay, not my computer. So in this example agents file, I added the name of the project, a short description, because it's good for the model to understand what the end goal of the app is. And then some hints, maybe architectural stuff, like the fact that we're using UDF, that we're using Hill for dependency injection, etc. These are things that are good to add to an agents file. This file is added to every single new task, as long as it's checked here, to every single new task that you start. So our first recommendation is that you start small. So don't add 50 pages of information here, because it would be wasteful to use it in every single task. Only add things when you see that the model is struggling to understand something, or maybe when the model is taking too long, it requires too many tool calls to figure something out about your project. For example, that it's multi-platform, or that you're using a specific dependency injection framework. Another tip that I want to share with you about agents is very interesting. They are hierarchical. So if you are editing a file in a subdirectory, the way the agent is going to look for agents files is by going up all the way to the root of your project. So every agents file that it finds, it's going to add it to the context. So if you're editing a file in the data module, it will include the agents file for the data in the data directory and also the one in the root. So that's pretty nice because you can add different levels of detail. All right, so those are the basics. Let's move on to the demos. The first one is going to be half a demo. I'm not going to show it completely, but this is something that we're working on, so it's not available yet. And we call it Create with AI. I, for one, I'm going to use it a lot because it lets you create apps from scratch just using natural language. So if I go to new project here, this lets me write something like create a calculator app. Optionally, I could attach images, maybe mocks of the UI or the color palette or whatever. So I'll give it a name, and off it goes. So this is great for prototypes, for trying out libraries, for reproducing bugs. Of course, you can also use it to start a new app, but it's not going to be production ready because that would take a long time. So because this is a complex operation, the agent works in a slightly different way. So first, it creates a plan with some key features, the libraries and tools that it's going to use. This would be the moment where you could say something like also add UI tests or add a setting screen, whatever. So if you're not completely happy with that plan, you can modify it. For the sake of the demo, I'm just going to say looks good. And off it goes again. So this takes around 15 minutes or something like that. So I wish we had that amount of time, but we actually don't. So you're going to have to trust me. I'm going to show this calculator app, which I created a couple of weeks ago with exactly the same prompt. It's not perfect. The 0 is a little bit weird, got stung or something, but it's pretty good, right? I just used like 5 words to create it. So let's look a little bit at the at the code. So this is the Jetpack compose code that it generated. It looks good. It's using best practices like material theme. It's using content descriptions. It's sending events to the view model. That looks pretty good. The view model is clearly where the operations happen. So, it's pretty comprehensive, and it's actually dealing with edge cases. For example, if the user, or preventing the user from adding multiple decimal points to a single number. So, pretty good. It also created unit tests for the view model, which I really like, and it created a lot of them. So I would actually trust this. So let's see if it actually works. I mean, I know it works because I created it 2 weeks ago. But just to show you, it does. And let's see if it handles errors, and it does as well. So this is pretty cool. Maybe we can try your own prompts later in the demo booth. So come over. But I hear you say, this is great, but I'm not going to be creating new apps all the time. I want to modify things that already exist. That's what Simona is here to show you.
Cool. Okay, so for a lot of these features that we've seen, and for the features that we have already right now out that we haven't mentioned today, all of these kind of support you in setting up, updating, and testing your code base. But we also want to make sure that the agent is a trustworthy and actually helpful companion during UI development. We want it to be well positioned and well placed to solve the right problems in this area as well. And we want it to make you, in the end, more efficient. So that's why we kind of teamed up Jetpack Compose in its tools, the agent, and the unique understanding that Android Studio has of your code base to support you better in things like creating completely new features and components, or doing major redesigns of existing elements, or when you're just needing to change an annoying padding for the 10th time. So that way, we decided on the following set of UI features that can help you out. And all of these are now available in Canary. So we're going to demo all of these out. I just want to quickly explain which ones we'll be covering. The first one is Transform UI with Gemini. So this new semi-new feature lets you use natural text language prompts to describe what UI you want and let the model implement it for you. Next up is a fully new feature, which is called Match UI to Target Image. This uses and lets your it uses an uploaded image to tweak your current existing component and better align it with the new target design that you have in place. Next one is Fix UI Check Issues. This is also a new feature that leverages the existing capabilities of the UI check mode, which you might have used before. And it basically analyzes your code to verify whether you have some potential UI issues, accessibility improvements, or improvements in the form factors and other form factors. And aside from that, we have two more to demonstrate today. First up is Generate Code from Screenshot. Again, a brand new AR feature that we just landed at Canary, which creates completely new components and completely new code from an existing mock that you give it. And finally, there is another feature called, I just need to scroll up to show you this, Generate Compose Previews. Now, this feature actually takes over the repeated task of having to write previews after previews for every single component that you have. You can just delegate it to the agent, and it will create this for you. So, as I said, we'll see all of this in demo. Transform UI and Generate Compose Previews are features that existed before as well. You might have tried them out, but these now come powered by the agent. So they're supported by the agentic flow, which means that the agent can now handle more complex problems. It can break down tasks into smaller subtasks, execute plans, and do multi-file edits, which in general give better results altogether. So let's go into the demo. Okay, cool. So we have one of our Jetpack Compose samples here that is called Jetlagged and has a very distinct visual kind of design and theme. And today we're going to start out by showing how we can actually start building the screen completely from scratch. So this screen does not exist. That's a very basic setting screen in place. And yeah, it doesn't exist in the app currently. What we're going to do is we're going to try and build it with the agent. So I'm actually, okay, just because I did it a bit too quickly, generate compose code from screenshot can be triggered from the preview pane or alternatively from a right click and in the file. So if I give the agent this screen, let's see what it comes up with. So again, no code exists for this. We're just going to give it to the agent and see what it comes up with. Initially, as Jose mentioned, like the agent is smart enough to kind of come up with a specific plan of how best to complete your task. So it starts invoking tools that it thinks are the best kind of candidates for completing the task that you give it. So in this case, it's kind of started out with something simpler, which is like, reading files, editing, searching for files, looking where best to place your code. So finding a suitable package or a module if it exists already, if not, to create one. And it starts looking at things like reusing existing components. So if you have design system components that are custom, it will try to reuse that in the best possible way. Or things like, of course, things like adding completely new resources, which is like this arrow back button here. So it was even smart enough to recognize that like it doesn't have this resource. I didn't have it in the app, so it actually generated this vector drawable for us. Unfortunately, as you can see, there are places where we kind of need to help it out a bit still. But in some cases, it was actually smart enough to do create this for you. So if I look at the code, this is everything that's been added right now, and I'm quite happy with it so far. I think it even added it added the preview as well, which is cool. And I think I'm pretty happy with this so far. If I compare it with the image, there's some tweaks here and there, mostly like color changes, but I'm okay with doing this in the second bit because for the next bit of like tweaking these polish and introducing polishes to your app, we have another feature that can help out a bit more. Now, among the tools that we've seen that Jose has been mentioning, there's another one that I kind of want to give you a quick glimpse of, which is the Analyze Current File tool. This is a tool unique to the Android Studio and the IDE because what it does, it's actually uses the static errors that are previously reported in your file to kind of look at things like unused imports, deprecated APIs, and catch all of these issues beforehand before triggering a much more costly kind of build Gradle, which could take a bit more time. So it kind of speeds this process of catching things up and iteratively fixing them when it detects them. Now, one thing I want to mention here, like one tip is, we've seen that there's a lot of tools, like the list is pretty long. Our tip to you is don't think about specific tools. Like you don't have to memorize every single one of them. Like it's not the problem that you're trying to solve, you should give it to the agent, and then the agent would be smart enough to kind of recognize, okay, to solve this task, I should call this and this tool, instead of you having to manually invoke them. Now, of course, you can do that, but to give you an example, I'm going to just tell it fix issues in this file. And because I'm giving it a problem, I'm kind of relying on the agent to do the best thing to kind of fix my code. So as you can see, it actually delegated this to the most appropriate tool call, which is the analyze current file, which is now going to go through the file and iteratively fix issues that it finds. So like things like unused imports or deprecated APIs, etc. So I'll just leave it doing its thing. In the meantime, while it's still doing, I just want to do like a quick check and see if the model was smart enough to introduce things like basic state handling, which it seems to be doing. And yeah, pretty happy with this. Okay, it's gonna go on for a while. Okay, perfect. Fix the files and remove the imports. I'm quite happy with this. Great. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. So now we have like a basic setting screen in place, which I'm kind of happy with right now. But oftentimes you implement something and then comes a redesign of the component. So you get a completely new design from your team, and they say that you need to kind of implement these new changes. So for this part, in basically having an existing component, but having to kind of better match it to a new redesign or to tweak certain things, we have a new feature called Match UI to target image. Now, I'm basically going to do what I told you right now, which is upload the new mock and let the agent handle this alignment and tweaking. What the agent tries to do when it tries to match your new target design with the existing component is basically starts reading all of the discrepancies between your current component and the target UI. So it basically comes up with a plan of like, okay, these are all the differences. I'm going to try and tackle all of them in a go. One thing to note here is I also have auto accept changes enabled. So like it's just kind of easier for me during the demo. So it adds all of the changes in it, but you can have control over it and just kind of accept changes on the go, which you think are most appropriate. Okay, so it started introducing some of the changes, and now that they've been added, there's another tool call that I want to show you, which is the one when the main chunk of the work has been done and the agent thinks it's completed the task successfully. It calls, in some cases, when it thinks it's the most appropriate call, it calls the render compose preview tool within the agent tab. Now, this tool actually renders the whole preview within the agent chat because it tries to show you the results of the work that it's done and that it introduced. And this tool call also checks that the newly added code was actually compiling successfully, that the preview is rendering successfully. And also this, similarly to the previous tool, it actually helps catch issues earlier than a Gradle build, basically. So you don't get code that's just, broken and unbuildable. Okay, cool. So I would say it looks pretty similar. There are tweaks that I still want to do, but again, I think I'm going to leave that for the next one. So now that we have like this kind of a tweaked screen in place, we can also see that we only have just like one composable preview for it, which is the main one. Now, following our best practices in Compose, the model was smart enough to kind of recognize that it needs to break down this massive UI into smaller components, like nested composables that like kind of are isolated, have their unique purpose, and are easier to test, preview, and reuse across. So because it added all of this, what I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to generate one single preview, but you could do that for pretty much all of the components that you have. Most of these components are pretty simple, but nevertheless, I would still like to preview them. So I've kicked off the Compose Generate workflow, and I let the agent deal with this task. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to let the agent deal with this. So in cases where, you have a lot of Compose previews and you have composables that are really complicated, that require a lot of data that you have to write for previewing the composable. This feature is super useful because you can kind of just delegate it to the agent and let it do its work for you. So now that it's kind of coming up with a plan of how best to create this preview, it lays out, again, similar plan like before, and it calls specific tools to kind of do this for you. Seems to be appending the preview now. One thing that I also want to show you. Cool. Okay. Seems to have added the preview. And additionally, the agent tries to follow like very specific code conventions that you have in your code. So it tries to kind of replicate what is already there and follow your your patterns that you use in the code. So for example, you can see that it actually added the show background because it did see that we were previously using it. It also wraps it up in the most appropriate theme that it finds that is unique to your app, and also generates mock data, which is super helpful when you have a lot of previews that you need to pass a lot of arguments to. Okay, cool. I'm happy with this so far. So we have now a screen in place. We have a few, previews to back it up with, but now I have something like I have a few changes that I want to add to the screen, which I'm kind of able to easily say and verbalize. Like I want to tweak here and there. I want to introduce bigger fonts. I want to add more spacing to some of these components. I want to left align the app bar. I want to make the button bigger, and I want to add a transparent a gradient background to the app. So there's quite a lot of things that I want to do, but I'm able to verbalize them, express them verbally. But in some cases, a lot of this code can be scattered all over, and I just don't want to have to chase all of this individually. So for this specific use case, we actually have a feature called Transform UI with Gemini. So this feature lets you use everyday natural language text prompts to describe what problem you're trying to solve or what you want the agent to do for you. You just delegate it to the agent and it does this for you. So so that I don't have to type all of this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give all of these subtasks to the agent and see what it comes up with. So I want to align settings to left, increase the font sizes, change account settings string, and add a warm, subtle pastel gradient background. Now, while it's going to do doing its thing, one tip from me is I personally really like to use Transform UI when I need a bit more inspiration or when I have an idea in mind, but I don't really know exactly what it's going to look like. So I just want a quick implementation to see whether what I've envisioned looks good. I'm personally not good at design, so I wouldn't have designs for this idea. So when you don't have a specific concrete idea or design, you can just kind of give this to the agent and see what it comes up with. So now it's in a similar pattern, coming up with a plan, invoking specific tools, adding all the changes, and it seems to be adding them all in one go, which is perfectly fine. One tip here, if you want to see the changes that it introduced, if you have auto accept enabled, you can just kind of go into this like diff view and see all of the changes that the agent has made for you, just as a quick one for you to validate if you agree or not with the changes. Okay, cool. So it added everything already. Seems to have completed all my tasks one by one. So I changed the string, left aligned, bigger fonts, pastel background. Looks good. Okay. Now that this is done, I want to acknowledge the fact that not all changes that you are going to be introducing are going to be as simple as this. We obviously need to keep some simplicity for the demo purposes, but there will be times when you want to just completely add entirely new feature, and Transform UI can actually help you with that as well. So if I go into Transform UI and I say something like add a chat fab, so in most cases, it tries to reuse like existing resources. Pro in most cases, and Flash apparently seems to if they don't find the existing resource that it can easily use, it tries to create the most sensible one for you. So in this case, I didn't have an actual chat icon, so it generated this vector drawable for me. I would actually prefer it to be black, but that's fine. I'll just leave it doing its job. So right now, it started adding the code. It added the missing resource, and it seems to have added the floating action button in the right place because I think this is like part of the scaffold. And seems to have added the fab here, and it generated the the vector drawable here as well. So I'm quite happy with this. It ran a successful Gradle build because it kind of wants to verify that the code is compiling. And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this so far. Okay, so we have our UI in place, but what about the quality of this code? Like we've done this chunk of the work, but we also want to ensure that the quality of the UI generated is good enough. So for this specific purpose, we added an additional feature um, to the UI check mode, which, as you've seen, are triggered from the preview pane. Now, this service actually runs and reports specific potential UI issues that it finds in the code, most notably usually accessibility improvements and things like, issues that come up in other form factors. So as we can see here, like there's quite a few. I'm going to try and zoom in so they can try and see this. It's very difficult with one monitor though. So it's actually reporting as some things. Okay, there's a text here in our app that seems to be reported as insufficient color contrast. So if I zoom in, I don't know if you can see properly, but it's kind of highlighting a few texts in here that might have insufficient color contrast. These are potentially issues that are accessibility improvements you can introduce in your app for people with specific accessibility requirements. So the new feature that we've added here to help you out with is this, and it comes in the form of this fix with AI. So if I run this, I selected this specific issue and I want the agent to actually fix it for me. So again, goes into invoking specific tools, and it's going to try and figure out the best plan of how to fix this. Now, there you go. Okay, cool. So it detected that the color that we were using was insufficient, and it found one that might be a better suited change for this. And now it's going to implement this specific change. So it added it. That's fine. Wants to verify we don't have any issues in the code. This is all you've seen before. And towards the end, there's another handy tool that it calls, which is the visual lint service tool. Now, this is the exact same service that it ran in the first place. So this is a service that helps detect these accessibility issues with, color contrast, typography, other form factors as well. So once the issue has been fixed, the agent reruns the same task to verify that this issue isn't really an issue anymore, that it's been fixed. So once it kind of successfully completes, as you can see, it reports that this specific issue has been fixed, but there are other ones that I haven't chosen to fix. You can go through all of these individuals, but for the sake of the demo, I'm going to stop here.